Hi, welcome back to the channel. This is a unfamiliar environment. I'm actually sitting outside in my greenhouse. I'm gonna try this for once, see how it works, how the sound quality is. This is an unedited video. Just trying to answer some of your questions. Great questions, by the way. I just think it's easier to answer them speaking rather than writing. Sometimes I prefer answering in writing, but the questions that reached me lately, I think I should be talking about. So I'm going to read out the first question. So Umar Salim 6676 says, "Hi, I have started listening to Rupert Spira. There are some things which I am struggling to understand about his non-duality model. I thought I should ask you because you are familiar with his work." Rupert says that we are the dream of God, we are the localization of infinite consciousness, and everything that exists is the manifestation of the universal consciousness. But my question is, why is the infinite consciousness dreaming, and why is there a need to localize itself into various separate consciousnesses to experience? Why is the infinite consciousness dreaming and wanting to live in an illusion? He says that the purpose of our life is to find out the true self, which is the source, infinite consciousness. But why doesn't the infinite consciousness wake up and awaken itself instead of demanding from us to wake to our true self? Also, one more point. If we are the dream of God and he sees the world through our eyes, then it can also be possible that this universal consciousness could also be the dream of some higher consciousness. So obviously there's a lot of questions packed into this one question, and first I need to qualify my answer. That is, I can't really claim to be familiar with Rupert Spira's work. I have listened to maybe 5 conversations with Rupert, but I could not claim to be an expert on what he's saying, nor could I claim to be an expert about the non-dualist movement. Also, from all the non-dualists that I've listened to in the past, let's say, year or so, I find Rupert Spira the most rewarding, because usually when non-dualists speak I find it quite frustrating because they don't I don't know, they just are not able to, how do I say, reach me personally so much. So I think what we have to realize is that we are all individually at sort of different points in our evolution, obviously. So there's going to be people, there's going to be models that speak to us and others that don't, and which is not to say that one or the other is more correct or better than the other. It's just that we tend to resonate with certain things, and that's okay, because you will resonate with different things at different stages of your lives and your development, obviously. So that said, I'm not in any way qualified to speak for Rupert Spira. I just wanted to make that clear. Nevertheless, the question I find is a very great question, and I asked myself that also along the way. Well, let me attempt to sort of respond to the many questions that are, or many statements also, that are packed into this one question that you submitted. So to this statement that we are the localization of infinite consciousness, I think if you've followed my channel for a while, and if you've listened to some of the videos I've made, I think that resonates with me. I think that's what's being pretty much said, or that's pretty much the bottom line of a lot of books that I've covered so far. They all come to the same conclusion, and that is that there is some type of infinite consciousness which is all encompassing, and we appear to be, just individualized spikes of that same underlying consciousness. So it doesn't really matter whether you come from spirituality or if you come from a scientific standpoint. They all seem to sort of converge in this insight. So I think that's correct. And you say that everything that exists is the manifestation of that universal consciousness, which I think rings true for me as well. I'm currently reading the book by Itzhak Bentov, which I will cover next, and he actually offers quite some useful concepts, I should say, that clarify all this, because up to now I've had difficulties finding, concepts or ideas that would show how does this manifestation process work. Like, if we can say, okay, there is this infinite consciousness, check, I'm fine with that, and there is individualized consciousnesses that manifest in the physical, check, I can ascribe to that as well. But how does that translation work? What's the process? What's the mechanics of this? So Itzhak Bentov does a really good job trying to explain that portion of things, which, so obviously I'm not going to talk about that right now because I'm going to make a separate video about this. But now to your actual question. So you basically ask, and here's another qualification we have to make. Apparently Rupert talks about the infinite consciousness as God interchangeably, as far as I can see from your question. I see a problem with that, because the term God has been so, let's say, loaded with different contents over the evolution of humanity, that I don't think it's the best term to work with. I would rather speak of source consciousness or infinite consciousness, because when we talk about God and the way we were sort of programmed, as humans, we tend to regard God as a person, just because we are individuals, we have personalities, so we tend to liken things that we want to explain, or things that we experience, to our own sort of state of being. And since we do have a body, we tend to regard God also as this, like, personality rather, and I think that's not correct. But nevertheless, your question is fair, because you pretty much ask, well, why is there individualization of consciousness in the first place? Why doesn't infinite consciousness just stay this vast calm sea, and why does it even have, why does it make waves in the first place? If I had to attempt to answer this question, I would probably say because it's first I would say because it can, and then I would say that seems to be the nature of nature, pretty much. You know, that seems to be what's happening. And I realize that this type of answer might be as frustrating as the answers that non-dualists tend to give. I appreciate that. I'm probably giving as frustrating of answers as I reproach non-dualists to give, but maybe it's best if I try to answer this question from the point of view of my 9-year-old self, because I remember that when I was about 9 years old, I had a similar question. I asked, you know, why would God need to disperse himself into the myriad of individual experiences that obviously there are? And the answer that I sort of got, you know, was because he was bored. And I can understand where that answer sort of comes from. I mean, if you try to for a second sort of project yourself into this infinite consciousness, you know, and provided that we cannot look at this, we cannot regard this infinite consciousness as person with volition, you know, but nevertheless it seems to be a unit in itself, no matter how vast this unit is. I think if you try to project yourself into that vast consciousness for a second, I think it makes sense to think that that's, even though you know you have everything, you're omniscient, you know everything, and you're omnipresent, you are everything. If you're just that whole thing, then that's probably very boring, you know. I mean, it's almost like if we go a couple of steps further down and say, let's say, well, if there are such things as angels, you know, imagine you're an angel, so and you're in this supposed place or state of being where everything's just light and love, you know, and there's no darkness and there's no duality and everything's fine. I think you might appreciate that state of being for a while, but then probably there comes a point where you just want to explore, you know, you want to go beyond that. And I think that's sort of like the answer, is that there seems to be something built into nature, some sort of basic curiosity and also creativity that drives manifestation, you know, that drives this initial movement of the underlying consciousness, that then drives levels of manifestation that will culminate at some point in individualized consciousnesses, if you will. So I think that would be my answer. I think it's just the nature of nature to be both creative and curious, and also intelligent, of course. And I think when you are that, you want to create, you want to explore, you are curious, you want to see what happens when you manifest this, that, or the other thing. And that pretty much would be my answer to your question. Just reading through it again, hold on. Well, there's another point in your question. Rupert says that the purpose of life for us in individualized consciousnesses is to find our true self, which is the realization that ultimately we are source consciousness. And you ask, why doesn't infinite consciousness, and I guess you mean the totality now, just sort of wake up to itself in one fell swoop, so we don't have to do the work for it, you know? I think, well, there's a certain circularity, obviously, in this argument, since we actually are infinite consciousness. It's just that all of us are infinite consciousness together, you know. So I think that's actually what is happening. Infinite consciousness is waking up to itself through our eyes, and that's the beauty of it, is that that's exactly what is happening. You are infinite consciousness's ears and eyes, and you are waking up to yourself. And it's actually really interesting, because I'm just reminded of a portion of Itzhak Bentov's maybe not book, because I also watched an hour and a half long presentation by his wife, who worked closely together with him on his book, so she pretty much has all the information that he came up with sort of ingrained in herself. And she said that at one point Itzhak Bentov came to a point where he saw he met source consciousness, so to speak, in his, I don't know, inner travels. And he asked the question, you know, he got to asking it the question, who are you? And what he saw then at this point was a mirror image of himself, of his physical bodily self. And he then had the intuition to do what he, over the course of his explorations, was trained to do, and that was merge his consciousness, so to speak, with the one that he saw, you know. So he pretty much decided to merge with that consciousness that he identified as God or source consciousness, and that's the moment of sort of realization, you know, of complete realization, because it's not anymore just an intellectual endeavor, it's you actually experience this merging. So I hope I was able to make myself clear somewhat. I think by waking up individually, source consciousness is actually waking up to itself, since we are an integral part of it. So as the parts wake up, the totality wakes up. And another learning, and I'm sort of excuse me, I'm sort of getting ahead of myself now, because I am tapping into the contents of Itzhak Bentov's work. He says that one of his points is that consciousness is modular, and that means, and the term modular means that any unit, and in that case any unit of consciousness, will always be divided into smaller but integral units. So see, we need to get away from our type of divisive thinking, let's say, we tend to think if there's a whole, then there's parts, right? But we tend to think of these parts as incomplete parts. But that's not the case. I think what's meant by integral parts is that concept of holography, is that any part of the whole contains the whole at the same time. So it's a part, yes, and it has a limited degree of freedom. It can exist it seemingly can exist on its own, or it forms an entity on its own. It's complete with anything that it needs to function, But at the same time, it's not just one part of the whole, but it sort of encapsulates the idea of the whole in itself, which is meant by saying it's an integral part. So any more advanced consciousness will contain all the lesser consciousnesses, right? And I think that's this sort of, I guess that you could wrap this up in the concept of holism. I mean, holism is a and I guess Itzhak Bentov's work is a combination of holism and also panpsychism. He actually says that in his book, that I think I remember him saying that that his conviction is some sort of panpsychism in the end, and that's completely different to our modern day mechanistic, materialistic type of thinking. So that's what we need to wrap our heads around, I feel, in order to understand statements by Rupert Spira and others. And I think they're doing, I'm always reminded of this parable that I don't remember where it came from, but it's a story or an image. It's like, picture there's an elephant in a enclosed, in a completely pitch black space, and in that in that same room there's a bunch of people, and all they can do is touch the elephant and then say what they experience and what they think it is. So not knowing what it is, and not knowing that it's an elephant, one person will touch its feet and sort of or its toes and say, well, it seems to be like a number of round hard plates of something, because that's obviously the toenails. The other person will touch the tail that is kind of hairy, so it'll say something like, well, it seems to be really thin and hairy, whatever it is. The other person will touch the trunk and say, well, it's kind of like a pipe, and it's, it seems to be, air seems to circulate inside of it. So obviously the point of this parable or this story is that any individual will only ever see in terms, will only ever perceive with their sensory organs a portion of the entirety or of the whole. And that's why I'm always very careful when somebody claims to have the truth, I don't think, I guess if somebody really has the truth, if somebody really is able to perceive the entirety, and sort of, if someone is or becomes enlightened, I don't think they would claim, I know the truth. I don't think they would actively claim to know the truth and actively want to be some type of guru and have all types of followers. I think, and that's why I'm always careful when somebody claims to know the truth, you know. And the same thing, I think, accounts for all types of theories, you know, that we might come up with. I think they're always just one way to look at the whole thing, and we should, and I think it never stops, actually. See, I think nature, or whatever you want to call this totality, I think is evolving itself. So it's not something that's done and that got bored and then decided to sort of split up in however many pieces. Well, that might be going on, and while that might be one of the movements that we are taking part of, I think that totality is also evolving, you know. So by splitting up and by making all these experiences, it is evolving as well. So any theory you come up with will only ever be good for a short period of time, you see, because by the time you think you grasp the whole thing already evolved further. So and I think those are things that we need to sort of come to terms with, you know, that it seems to just be a constant evolution that is going ever higher. And one very helpful sort of image in my mind was the spiral that's going upward, you know. When you're a human being and when you're incarnated in a physical body, you tend to make the same sort of, you feel like you're always making the same experiences time and time again. You seem to move in circles, you know. And you might, you know, the same sort of topics might come up for you time and time again over the course of your lifetime. But then what you don't notice is the delta that's actually happened, you know, with the next turn of the circle. So with every turn of the circle, you actually move up, so to speak, a little bit. So there's a delta that happens, and that delta is the in my mind is the consciousness that you gain. Okay, so you're actually moving up a spiral, and so to wrap this up, I think depending on where you are on that spiral, you will find this, that, or the other theory or spiritual practice or whatever helpful, you know. And all these different theories have their point and have their raison d'être, their right to exist. And I think it's just about finding what's helpful to you at the moment. So if you find that any sort of spiritual person that you might be listening to, such as a person like Rupert Spira, is frustrating you more than it's helpful to you, then maybe that's not the right person for you to listen to in that particular moment, you know. So keep searching, stay curious, and you will sort of attract, I believe, the right piece of information at the time to help you move further along your own particular spiral. And of course, and that sort of leads into the next question about meditation. Of course, and that's probably one of the very vital things that happen along the way is that there comes a point where you realize that as much as you can seek answers outside of yourself and find answers, you know, the same can happen by turning inward. So that's the beautiful thing, if you think about it. Since you are an integral part of the whole, meaning since everything that's in the totality is also in you at some level, and you have access to the totality at all times, you are actually able to find answers to all your questions by turning inward. So instead of asking me that question, you could ask yourself that question and see what comes to you, you know. I mean, I'm not saying don't ask the questions, because I actually appreciate you asking the questions. But that's just saying that, you know, we can turn to all types of books and people and try and find our answers there, but we can also turn inwards and find the answers there as well. So I hope that answers that question a little bit. So let's go to the second question that was asked a while ago. Can you share your knowledge about meditation and what it means to you? Now, I don't think it's that interesting to hear, but I can certainly try to answer that question. Meditation meant different things to me at different points in my life. So, and I went about it in various ways at different times in my life. So when I was 20 something, I left the church and I turned Buddhist. I actually got baptized, in a way, if you wish, by a Rinpoche. I got a name, Buddhist name. I went to a local branch of Koshu, Diamond Way, Buddhism, yeah. And I went there about once a week to join just like a group meditation. I also did some how do you say, like I went abroad to join weekly retreats in which we would learn a certain type of meditation. For instance, once I went to Spain and I learned conscious dying, which sounds really crazy when you sort of tell the story like that, but there is, in Buddhism, there is a way to sort of prepare yourself while you're alive for the different stages that obviously apparently you go through when you die. So you learn how to I don't know the English word, like you learn how you make your consciousness leave the body through here, through that, I guess, chakra. And when you meditate, well, that was my experience. We all meditate. It was like probably a couple hundred people, probably like 600 people in one huge hall, and we did the same meditation over and over for about 7 days. And what would happen is that the spot up here would soften in a lot of people. A lot of people actually would start bleeding even. So I didn't bleed, but I got really sensitive. So at the end of the week, the Lama who was teaching us would touch each and every one up here at this point. It's like, I guess, 8 fingers from the middle of your, like where your hair starts, go 8 fingers back, and that's where the point is. So he would press here and you would cringe because it was so sensitive. So that was sort of like the sign that you were on the way of accomplishing this meditation. And I would do, I mean, this was Tibetan Buddhism that I joined, so I would do the prostrations. You're supposed to do, I mean, in that lineage that I joined, you have these like 4 basic types of meditations that you would learn one after the other, and you would have to do so and so many repetition of one style of meditation until you could sort of go to the next level. And I always stayed at the first level. You were supposed to do 100,000 prostrations, and I did about 70,000, I guess, at the time, over the course of a year. So that was like 400 a day, I guess. So I lost a lot of weight. I was like 140 pounds at the time. Now I'm like 220 or something. So maybe I should pick up the prostrations again. And I would, of course, do a lot of sitting meditation. And you would meditate, you would sort of meditate on something, on a Buddha aspect. Training your mind to focus, pretty much. Yeah, and I mean, you know, you do have, with time, and depending on your overall state of mind, I think I was pretty depressed at the time. I had a lot of instances of actually clinical depression in my life, so I had to go to the hospital for months on end, you know, with every depression. And so basically until recently I would have recurrent depression. So I mean, that's why I say depending on your overall state of mind. So I guess, but I did have some instances, and I mean, I'm talking like seconds, you know, of expansive feeling of consciousness, I guess, at the time. But I was from my 20s until about, I don't know, 30, until about, I guess, 40, I was really ambitious in my work, and just ambitious all over. So meditation to me was also an ambition, you know. And I found that, I mean, that's one way you can go at it, but it's probably not that, it's not going to be that successful. So, because what I found was, the more you want something, it's not happening for you. So if you're like ambitious about wanting to be a good meditator, you know, and wanting to expand your consciousness, you're sort of standing in your own way, I guess, because you keep up this feeling of there's you know, this person is meditating, trying to achieve something, which obviously is not what you, I mean, it goes sort of like against the grain of it all. But I guess, so I did that for a while, and then, as I said before, I would have bouts of depression throughout all these years, and I would get hospitalized and get better and get hospitalized again. So I would also have the experience that, well, when I was clinically depressed, anything that I was doing beforehand in terms of religion or spirituality would be gone. I mean, in the instance that I was clinically depressed, I didn't have access to any sort of spirituality at all. My brain wasn't functioning at all. I couldn't pretty much count to 3 anymore, even though when I'm good, when I'm well, I do have rather, I guess, I have a fair IQ. But at the time when I was depressed, I wasn't able to compute simply anymore. So after one of these bouts of depression, I just had other things to worry about in my life, you know, like trying to keep my job and I don't know, all these things that you have to do, you know, finding a place, getting through life on your own and all that kind of stuff. So that meditation, that sort of rigid type of meditation, moved into the background a little bit. And with time, I realized that even making music can be a form of meditation. Actually, anything you do can be a form of meditation. And I realized that it's about more of a movement of allowing yourself. It's a movement of relaxing into a state of mind without wanting something, if that makes any sense. So recently I picked up drumming for a while, and I realized, or I found myself being in a lot of times when I went to the drumming lesson, I was in a sort of flow state. That was really nice. So I know it can be done through music. I always loved nature, so I love to be just out in nature, being still and just observing nature. So right now I'm sitting in my greenhouse and I'm obviously planting seeds and stuff, so I would sit here and I would just watch the little flower pots, you know, every day to see if something's sprouting already, and if something's sprouting, then I would sit there and just watch them, literally watch the plants grow if I have time. I really love doing that, so that's a form of meditation for me nowadays. Sorry, the dog is panting in the background, he's hot. And then most recently I discovered the gateway process, which supposedly is a way to learn how to astral travel and have out-of-body experiences. So sorry about all the noise, but that's the nature of the greenhouse. It's actually kind of windy today, so and I started to get into that gateway process thing. I'm not religious about it, like I won't do like twice a week or 3 times a week, just like I'm not trying to get that rigid anymore about things. I just sort of when I feel like it, I'll do one of them. And what I found was that it's a way to really relax my body in the first place, which is hard for me to do. I don't tend to be in touch with my body that much, never have been, probably due to my autism, I don't know, but for me it's a way to, I'm experiencing a type of deep relaxation, like a bodily relaxation that I haven't ever experienced before, which is really nice. I didn't know that was possible. And when the body is that relaxed, visualization and all that other kind of stuff, mental stuff, becomes a lot easier. So I guess what I'm on, bottom line, trying to answer your question, I think meditation to me is a way of life. It's not something that I do at a fixed period of time every day. It's not like a chore anymore. It used to be a chore when I got into Buddhist meditation and all that, but over the years, or over the decades I should say, it became more like a way of life. So I'm no longer trying to do something. I'm just more in the I recognize there is something that people call the flow state, and that's a really nice state of being, and I catch myself being in that sort of state, and it's more like I'm allowing myself to be in that kind of state. and it's a way for me to manage my energy. Obviously, as an autistic person, I had to learn how to manage my own energy quite closely, because it fluctuates a great deal, and in order to be able to hold a job, for instance, you know, and just function, I guess, it's important for me to really be able to manage my own energy. So allowing myself these moments during the day, for instance, to sort of dip into that flow state really helps me stay balanced. So that's what meditation is to me. So I hope this was helpful. I actually appreciate you guys asking questions. And I will probably take another couple of days to finish that Itzhak book, because I just had the most busy work week, so I haven't had much time to read, actually. And I don't want to just put out a video, so I put out my number of videos a week or something like that. I don't work like that. If I put out a video, I want to make sure it's good quality content. So I hope you understand, and I will read as fast as I can, and I'll see you then. Bye.